Before the Buddha, insight meant knowledge of the divine, specifically mastery of the Vedas. The Brahmins of ancient India believed that because they were born from the mouth of Brahman, they possessed the language of the gods. They believed they could move the gods and preside over the cosmic order through hymns, rituals, and incantations. Accordingly, the threefold knowledge meant mastering the knowledge of the three collections: the Rigveda, which summons the gods with hymns, the Yajurveda, which prescribes ritual procedures, and the Samaveda, which pleases the gods with melodies. A Brahmin who mastered these three Vedas was called a Brahmin of threefold knowledge and was granted authority equivalent to the divine. This was because, by the Brahmanical period, the belief emerged that even the gods had to follow appropriate rites, sacrifices, and incantations. Thus, the authority of a Brahmin of threefold knowledge came to rival the power of the gods. In the era of Brahmanism, attaining the threefold knowledge meant acquiring divine authority, which served as the ideological foundation dominating the consciousness of ancient Indians and supporting the order of a caste-based society. However, at the moment of enlightenment, the Buddha fundamentally transforms the meaning of the threefold knowledge, shifting it toward an insight into human existential life and karma. For the Buddha, enlightenment was an insight that pierced through the conditionality and consciousness of suffering based on karma. The Buddha speaks of the threefold knowledge as three types: the knowledge of recollecting past lives, the divine eye, and the knowledge of the destruction of taints. Here, recollecting past lives means remembering numerous previous existences. The divine eye means knowing truly how beings die and are reborn according to the karma they have created. And the destruction of taints is the wisdom that eliminates the outflow of defilements that cause rebirth. Yet, there is no small trend toward interpreting even the Buddha's threefold knowledge in a transcendental or mystical dimension. It is claimed that recollecting past lives is a superpower to remember individual past lives in actual history. The divine eye is a clairvoyant power to see through the time and space of the entire universe, and the destruction of taints is an event of becoming an immortal being beyond the shackles of causality. However, such interpretations revive the transcendence and divinity that the Buddha rejected, shackling his enlightenment to myth and dangerously deluding people by reconstructing the Brahmanical structures of discrimination and authority within Buddhism and the community. How, then, should we understand the Buddha's threefold knowledge? To answer this, we must first examine how each philosophy explains the world and what function enlightenment serves within that worldview. Before the Buddha, the place where actual memory or knowledge of past lives formed the core of enlightenment was Jainism. Jainism believed that the self is originally a pure soul, but past actions of pleasure and sin generate karma in the form of subtle matter from the material realm, which flows into and binds the soul, causing rebirth and wandering in sasra. In this belief, liberation is the restoration of the soul's original pure state by blocking the influx of past karma and future karma through asceticism. In such a Jain worldview, the memory of past lives performs a decisive function for obtaining liberation. Knowing past lives is the wisdom that proves the existence of the same soul passing through multiple births, and it is the insight to confirm how thick the accumulated karma from past lives is and to gauge the degree of asceticism required. Accordingly, the rebirths of Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, are recorded with great importance. In Jainism, knowledge of the memory of past lives becomes a prerequisite for complete enlightenment. However, the Buddha declares that practice and liberation based on Jain knowledge of past lives are not valid for the following reasons. According to the Devadaha Sutta, first, no one can know their past lives. The Buddha criticizes the Jains for claiming that whatever a person experiences is due to what was done in the past. Yet none of them actually knows or can know their past lives or past actions. Second, the claim that asceticism exhausts past karma is unverifiable. The Buddha points out that Jains do not know how much karma has been exhausted or remains through asceticism. For the elimination of karma through asceticism to be possible, the amount of karma would have to be measurable, but it cannot be measured. Third, the premise itself that current suffering is the result of past karma is empirically contradictory. The Buddha points out that since pain arises when one practices asceticism and disappears when one stops, that pain is the result of current actions, not past karma. In other words, because asceticism based on Jain fatalistic knowledge only increases pain, liberation cannot be achieved through it. Yet, paradoxically, the Buddha expresses his own enlightenment as the threefold knowledge. Of course, this does not mean a transcendental ability to look into actual past lives in time and space as a single identical soul, as Jainism claims. Ordinary people perceive the world as existing in time and space independently of themselves. However, the idea that a separate world exists apart from me, or that an independent self exists apart from the world, are both groundless premises. The Buddha perceives that the world does not exist in itself, but is revealed in the experience of contact, which is the harmony of the three laws: the 6 internal sense bases, the 6 external objects, and the 6 types of consciousness. From the Buddha's perspective, the thoughts of ordinary people arise from the consciousness of seeking existence, which constructs objects as name and form from the experience of the 12 bases and 6 consciousnesses. That is, the state of defining objects as name and form and adhering to that ontological perspective is the product of ignorance. The Buddha further classifies the world that is reached and changed according to intention and karma into the 3 realms: the realm of desire, the realm of form, and the formless realm. Ordinary people are born and stay in each region of the 3 realms according to their intention and karma, unable to escape the consciousness of the 3 realms. In this respect, the Buddha's knowledge of past lives is not about actual past lives placed in time and space, but about knowing all the regions of the 3 realms, the worlds according to intention and karma, and the worlds that can be experienced in the present, that is, knowing all previous existences. Furthermore, the divine eye has its origins in the eye of the gods. In Brahmanism, the eye of the gods is associated with the divine power to judge the good and evil of actions. Brahmanism saw that the laws governing the movement of the sun, moon, and stars were maintained by a moral and cosmic order called Rita. Varuna was the guardian of this Rita, watching all human actions with 1,000 eyes, and the sun god Surya was regarded as Varuna's eye, illuminating the good and evil of the world. Just as the eye of the gods symbolizes the divine ability to know the retribution according to good and evil actions, the Buddha borrowed this form and called his own enlightenment the divine eye. That is, he truly knows how beings die and are reborn in the 3 realms according to the karma they have created, the retribution determined by karma. For example, the realm of desire consists of the 6 realms of hungry ghosts: asuras, animals, humans, hell, and heaven, symbolizing greed, anger, ignorance, desire, pain, and contentment. Just as intentions and actions based on greed create the consciousness and world of a hungry ghost, each intention and karma forms a corresponding consciousness and realm of existence. Therefore, the divine eye that knows the death and birth of beings becomes an insight that pierces through the structure in which sentient consciousness repeats the causality of karma within the 3 realms. The destruction of taints is the final of the threefold knowledge and the insight that conveys what Buddhist enlightenment is. The concept of taint was originally a core principle in Jainism, referring to the influx of karmic matter from the material realm into the pure soul. In Jainism, the destruction of taints means blocking the influx of karmic matter into the soul through asceticism. However, for the Buddha, taint is an outflow, the flowing out of the mind or consciousness toward external objects. That is, when one fails to guard the 6 sense doors, consciousness heads toward external objects conditioned by desire, which means projecting one's own constructed name and form back onto external objects and adhering to the structure of the 5 aggregates of clinging. What was the direction of matter flowing into the soul in Jainism is transformed into the direction of the mind or consciousness flowing out toward external objects in the Buddha's teaching. This shift is not a simple redefinition of terms, but signifies a shift in the worldview itself. The Buddha saw that the cause of suffering does not lie in the influx of karma created in past lives, but in the flow of consciousness that seeks existence by clinging to external objects conditioned by desire within the mind. Therefore, the destruction of taints is the insight that removes greed, hatred, and delusion from one's own experience and world, the flow of consciousness that causes suffering in the reality of the realm of desire. In this way, the Buddha turned the authority of the threefold knowledge from transcendence back to the understanding of human karma and the practice of the cessation of suffering. This is a declaration that liberation from suffering does not depend on transcendental knowledge such as divine authority or knowledge of past lives, but on human practice, facing the conditionality of one's own suffering here and now and changing it. In other words, Recollecting past lives is the insight to truly know within one's own experience the world of consciousness of the three realms formed according to intention and karma. The divine eye is the insight that pierces through the structure in which sentient consciousness disappears and arises again, according to the causality of karma. And the destruction of taints is the wisdom that removes greed, hatred, and delusion by intuiting the flow of consciousness seeking existence that causes suffering. The Buddha names the state without this threefold knowledge as ignorance. Ignorance is the cognitive structure of ordinary people as ignorance of the truth of suffering. From the Buddha's perspective, a cognitive structure based on transcendence actually subordinates us to the structure of suffering. What the Buddha's threefold knowledge teaches is the fact that, whatever the conditions of suffering may be, the place where one can face and change them is always one's own consciousness here and now. Just as the Buddha understood the structure of suffering in his own life, grasped the correct causal relationship between suffering and its cessation, and practiced the cessation of suffering according to intention and karma, I hope that we too can intuit that we can face and change the conditionality of our suffering here and now.